The Ashkenaz Festival returns to locations across Toronto from August 30th to September 6th. Experience the best of the global Jewish music scene, including klezmer, Yiddish, Sephardic, Ladino, Persian, and so much more. Most programs free, from downtown to North York. Details at ashkenaz.ca.
Interfaith marriage is on people's minds again. The conservative movement recently published a responsum guiding rabbis on how to welcome interfaith couples and families. We wade into the discussion and ask whether the movement is trying to do the impossible, how other movements are dealing with the question, and what values are showing up when we talk about welcoming these couples and families. I'm Avi Feingold, and along with Yedida Eisenstadt and Matthew Leibel, we are not in heaven. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back. We're at full strength.
I'm excited to see you again. It's been, what did my mom say when I was young that I never listened to? As you get older, time goes faster.
I am definitely feeling that.
I hate when our parents are proven to be right. I mean, I don't hate it because then at least the advice I was getting has credibility. But, it's so true. Like the summer. When I was a kid, summer felt like an eternity. But we're together again, so I'm going to focus on that.
Yeah. How have your trips been and everything?
Well, you know what Jerry Seinfeld says about a holiday with your family, right?
You need a vacation afterwards?
Well, kind of. It's just like you're just screaming at each other in a hotel room.
Yeah.
That's part of why we don't go anywhere. No, that's not true. We will go somewhere at some point.
We took a great trip. The boys had fun. We definitely had some bonding moments. I'm sure if you asked them what their favorite part of it was, they would say the new game they played on their tablets in the hotel room at night, as opposed to all the things we were trying to do to load up the day, children's museums, zoos, amusement parks.
See, we learned not to call them vacations after a while. They were just, we're going on a trip.
Time away.
And then your expectations were managed.
Sure. Sounds like a semantics argument to trick yourself, but that's fine.
Yeah, you're getting a change of scenery, a different. We're going back to that farm for Rosh Hashanah with all the kids, and that will also that will be our change of scenery and a little bit of time away. But we're also working, so I do agree that a vibe change is important.
Speaking of work, Yedida, before we get into our main topic, I saw you wrote a really big article about everybody's favorite topic.
Is it?
No. Circumcision. Tell us a bit about this.
I wouldn't say that it's about circumcision as much as it's about the history of the circumcision liturgy.
Mm-hmm. I've always been fascinated by this piece of the liturgy.
So what fascinates you about it?
There's this moment where we talk about, by your blood you shall live. And it's this random piece that we don't say anywhere else. And I get that it's something about living through the blood, but it seemed a little arbitrary.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
I did play-by-play for my nephew's bris back in late February, early March, because my brother-in-law has all these friends who are not Jewish or really had never been to it. And bless my sister. I mean, most moms, we kind of say, go to the bedroom.
Yes.
You don't want to see this. You don't have to see this. She's right there in the front, first row, and they got like this little elevated area. Everyone's kind of looking down and staring. And so the Moyle, he was busy. Like he was a little bit focused, right? So during the time when he's trying to get everything set up, it was so awkward and quiet. I just had to start, explaining what was going on. Well, yeah, like people were kind of looking at me like, what is he doing?
Sportscasting, rabbiing. So the article is a history of the development of the Jewish ritual of Brit Milah, and my interest in it particularly are these verses from the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 16, that are familiar to people from this liturgy and also sometimes the Pesach Haggadah. Those verses that when you're going around the table inevitably fall on the adolescent boy reading about the maturation of the woman's body. That's from the same set of verses here. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that, which I explain in the article. But
by the way, they edited that out of the Walmart Haggadah that my family uses, just so you know.
I'm not sure if it's edited out or it actually doesn't make it into some traditions. That's a separate research project, not fair. For now. But basically, through close reading of the Midrash and historical developments and contextualization, I make the case that the liturgy as we know it, those verses and what follow, are medieval innovations, and that they are introduced as Jews move into Northern Europe increasingly and come into contact with their Christian neighbors. And all of those verses make a claim that the covenant is ours, that it has not been superseded by Christianity, and that covenant is fulfilled by the performance of mitzvot, especially this mitzvah of initiating boys into the covenant. And the first thing they do upon their entry into the covenant is fulfill a mitzvah in drinking some of that wine. And it was the culmination of years and years of research. And Matthew, to the point about like women being in the other room if they don't want to be present, because it really is the father's mitzvah.
Of course.
I was the only parent there when physically present in the room when my boys had their brit, which was like crazy on a number of counts, right? Phil was mobilized to Africa, and it was a home ritual, which historically it was. And I got to say the brachot. It was especially meaningful for me as the mom.
That's really cool. That's a really cool story. I mean, I knew a little bit. It makes sense because roles like the Sandek, like the Godfather, the Kvader or Kvaderen, I heard that there was a lot of influence of like Christian tradition at the same time, right? So if anyone, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I wanted to tell you that while you're studying one of the most foundational and long-standing rituals in Jewish tradition, I am trying to revive something new at Simkin Center on just the other day on Rosh Chodesh Elul.
Redoing people's brisses?
No. We had I labeled it as there's no brisses, no spaying or neutering here. We did a bark mitzvah. It was just a clever name for a blessing of the animals to tie into Rosh Chodesh Elul. For anyone who doesn't know, and it's kind of obscure, in the Mishnah, there's 4 New Years, 4 Jewish New Years. There's Rosh Hashanah, which we all know. There's Tu B'Shvat, New Year of the Trees, for counting trees when they, you can take the fruit and stuff. I think it's the 1st of Nisan is the New Year for counting kings and for organizing all the pilgrimage festivals. And then Rosh Chodesh Elul, though not agreed upon by all rabbis, was the New Year of the animals because you had to tithe your animals. And you had to know, like, when was the cutoff line, like a tax bracket?
It's like a fiscal New Year. That's what I explained to somebody this week.
Fiscal New Year. Yeah. So was the animal born before the 1st of Elul or after the 1st of Elul? And then that's how you do your count and you take a tenth of all those. And so I've seen this tradition. It actually came up when I was studying to become a rabbi with our teacher, Rabbi Stephen Blaine. He talked about creating this blessing of the animals ceremony. But our teacher was like, the blessing of the animal ceremony, friends, is our biggest event of the year. And this was 10 years ago. And I kind of laughed at him. I'm like, come on. And some people do it around the reading of Parsha Noach when they talk about all the animals on the ark. Some people do it for the New Year of the animals. Call it whatever you want. Obviously Bar Mitzvah got people's attention, and the majority of the animals were dogs. They usually are. Dog owners love bringing their dogs around. And at Simkin Center, pets go over huge with our residents. But I'll tell you, we had like 30 dogs. We also
were any of them wearing kippas or little doggy talits?
A couple of people did. No talises, but a couple of people did have doggy kippas that they had purchased or brought. And I gave a little review of all the mitzvot in the Torah that focus on animal well-being, because there are so many, including some in our textual healing this week. And then we did a blessing for the individual birds and fish of Simkin, and then for all of the dogs. And then we had a little doggy parade. It was like 20 minutes. No major accidents, no dog attacks. I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but I had done it once back in 2017, an event for the Federation. And again, Jewish people who don't go to anything will come to this and bring their dog. Like, you get people out of the woodwork, so to speak, and it's really, really fun. And no cats came because they were told to stay back, and they were all happy with that.
No, it's because there are no cats in America, and the streets are paved.
This happened in Canada.
Let's go to our main topic, actually. It is about ritual, actually, and so that's a nice little sort of segue. And it is about the conservative movement. They have a committee on Jewish laws and standards. They are the halachic arm of the conservative movement, and they published a tshuva recently entitled Gateways into Jewish Living, Guiding the Conservative Masorti Rabbi in Supporting Families with Non-Jewish Loved Ones. I mean, this was designed as a guide for rabbis to help them create moments where an interfaith family could be included while they don't allow for halachic marriages. Among other things, they say that shuls can hire someone with a non-Jewish spouse for anything but clergy. Interfaith families can be wished mazel tov officially. They can stand with a Jewish spouse for their aliyah. Rabbis can have a Chanukat Habayit ceremony for an interfaith couple, putting up a mezuzah in their home and welcoming them into the community in that way. And it has created renewed dialogue about the movement and interfaith marriages in general. Some rabbis are praising the move and saying, you see, we have to do this. And others are pointing out that they have been doing this for years already. Like the rabbis have been doing this for years already. And, the movement has basically been playing catch up. I thought this was interesting simply because it renews the discussion around the conservative movement and halacha in general, and the relationship between the way in which Judaism is practiced and the way in which a movement, even Orthodoxy, discusses halacha around it. And I was wondering, before we get into specific questions, did you guys have any initial thoughts about the tshuva itself or the discussion around it?
My initial thought is that 2006 would have been a better year for this conversation as opposed to 2026. And as a result, they do look slow and behind and reactive. And of course, sidestepping the really big issue. That's all anyone wants to talk about in the articles that are covering this tshuva.
Did they sidestep it? They said no. They didn't sidestep it.
Well, I mean it in the sense that you need to make a decision.
I was going to say, I think Matthew was saying is that they didn't make a robust discussion around this specifically.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
they do what they always did. They make it seem like, oh, we're taking this very seriously, but they're dealing with all the easy. A lot of conservative rabbis have been wishing mazel tov and giving misha berach to interfaith families before, after. This is not new stuff. You let the non-Jewish partner up on the bimah to watch the kid read their kid read Torah, but they don't do the bracha. I mean, these were ideas from a decade ago. My problem with it is that the issue is the wedding. The issue, the wedding is the moment. And I don't believe this argument that the couples really care if their rabbi can give them a nice little blessing if they can't be at the wedding. They're going to remember you weren't at the wedding.
No, but now they're saying rabbis can go. They can't do the wedding, but they can be present and they can party and celebrate.
They can make a non-liturgical blessing of some kind while being present. Meaning they can't go and give a bracha of erusin. They can't go and read a ketubah. But if they want to speak under the chuppah, they're allowed to.
To what end, though? We've restricted the whole thing. The point is that I still think they're missing the point. I don't think any of these things really change how the conservative movement is viewed with dealing with interfaith families. I think they're missing the major issue, which is the wedding. And they're just getting farther and farther behind. What they really need to do is they need to create a framework for the interfaith wedding. That's what they needed to do.
A separate ritual that is recognized in the eyes of halacha? What are you saying?
Yeah. I mean, according to the rules that this movement plays by, that's what their goal needs to be. This, we didn't mention it in the opening, Avi, but about 6-7 months ago, the movement started with a formal apology to all the interfaith families that they've offended. Because for years and years and years, the narrative in so many shuls was intermarriage is the threat. It's the worst threat to our. And so they needed to walk that back with some kind of formal apology and then have some legal discussion around it. But if the wedding is an issue and you can't participate, why are you doing all this other stuff?
Okay, so
figure it out.
I'm going to roll this back just a little bit and say that my reaction to all of this is that this is an impossible needle to thread. Whether or not we agree that this is a punt, and I can see the argument for that. This is impossible, right? If the conservative movement is a halachic movement, and it wants to be,
I think they want it to be, yeah.
They can't. There is no halachic framework that recognizes interfaith marriage, to the best of my knowledge, right? And there's an argument to be made that let's research and go down that path, but you have to decide that you want to go down that path. I think that it is the right decision to be more welcoming and warm and embracing these interfaith families and connecting them to Judaism and Jewish life. But I think that it is legit to say, to a point, our halachic framework requires that for a halachic marriage, that both people be Jewish.
If that's the stance, then why are they worrying so much about welcoming these people? Because that stance ultimately is unwelcoming.
And so I agree with you, it is unwelcoming, but I think that, I think there's two things that have to happen here. First of all, I don't agree that the movement needs to be led by what people want to do, right? Like, that's not a halachic argument.
You mean the public, the customers?
Why do they get to dictate to the movement that it should create a halachic framework for intermarriage?
I want to point out, if I may, that is such an important point that you're saying here. And I think that so much of what is not being said in this tshuva and in a lot of the discussion around here is that they realize that they made a mistake by following the people to driving on to shul on Shabbat, and that was something that they shouldn't have done, and that they realized when you go to what the people are doing and not to like what your principles are, you end up diluting the movement to a point where there's a point of no return. And they don't want to make that mistake again. That is my read of what's going on.
What do you mean, like with the driving to shul business?
Meaning they made a tshuva, I think it was in the 50s, where they said
62 or 63.
Okay.
Sorry,
I thought it was the late 50s, but thank you. I hadn't looked it up. And they basically said, we are going to allow people based on a variety of different halachic discussions, which is beyond here, to say you can drive to shul on Shabbat, but you can't do any other driving. And people started driving regardless. And it really is one of the things that led to a decline in conservative synagogue life, and people recognize that. And
is that because of the driving? Weren't those people all just going to drive or already driving on their own anyway?
Sure, but so it's the interfaith discussion. If people are doing this anyways, we have to figure out a way for them to be able to do it, and they don't want to make that mistake to say it's allowed. So
yes, but at the same time, if you don't listen to what your people are doing, you're going to be with a bunch of empty buildings and no people. Because the last thing I remember, to have a synagogue, you needed to have an ark with a Torah, a ner tamid, a bimah, and people, right?
Choosing the pews.
The people direct you, whether they're your audience who listens to our podcast, TV show, readers of a newspaper. The audience tells you. And at conservative movement, like, they can't see my hands, but this is where the audience is headed in terms of attendance. Exponentially down.
I have long said, and I'm sure I've said it here before, that I think that being modern and committed to Jewish practice is much harder than being super committed Jewish practice, but not committed to living in the world and being modern, and much harder than being totally modern and not caring about Jewish practice. The middle is much harder. And in reading this, I actually thought it's much harder to be a committed conservative Jew. To be a modern Orthodox Jew, ideologically, knowledgeably, it requires depth of knowledge in the details of halakha to figure out like where you can eat and what you can eat when you're outside your comfort zone, how you can compromise on Shabbat, etc. And I think that in a lot of ways, the conservative movement's even harder because it requires all of that depth of knowledge, but the communal framework is looser, right? Like, people aren't living necessarily within walking distance of a synagogue. My question is for the young people, and I guess I'm not one of them anymore, is if you aren't raising your kid with a thick Jewish practice in the home, on the weekend, in the school, in the summer camp.
But I'm sorry, but I'm saying, like, a lot of these people are like, thick Jewish practice has got, quotation marks around it, because I think a family who sends their kid to Jewish day school, gives their kid a bar bat mitzvah, sends their kid to camp, probably thinks that that's a thick Jewish practice.
It is. What I'm saying is that those families who have raised their families with that thick Jewish life and culture hopefully are able to articulate why their Judaism and their practice and continuation of the covenant is important, and have impressed that on their kids, such that when their kids fall in love, that's part of the equation, right? There's a conversation about conversion or building a Jewish home. And I think that that's really important to foreground.
I know, but sometimes you can't control these things. I was 22 years old when I met my wife. We had like a love at first sight kind of meeting in a restaurant. She wasn't Jewish at the time. All the values that I had, the school, the everything, like, I'm a rabbi right now.
And
I was
she
swept
saw that.
I
was attracted to it.
Right, but I was swept off my feet, and for a lot of people, the other person may not want to convert to anything, and that's the reality we live in, right?
And that's the argument for the embrace.
Yes, but that's why the embrace falls short.
Your falling in love doesn't require the movement to compromise on a really central principle of halacha.
Unless they want me to still be connected to the movement. That's what I'm saying, is that like this is what's happening more and more in people's lives.
Can I interpret something that Yedid is saying? Matthew, let me ask you something. Are there things that you would have considered an absolute deal breaker in that if you met somebody, even if it was love at first sight, you'd be like, I'm sorry. Yes. Right?
Jewish kids. That was what I said to Heather at the beginning, was Jewish kids.
So you had a Jewish value. You had a Jewish value that was important. For a lot of the kids, for probably the vast majority of people that are marrying a non-Jewish spouse, what Yedida is pointing out is that those kids did not learn a set of Jewish values that were deal breakers when it came to a relationship.
Right.
And that if you want your kids to not marry somebody that is not Jewish, then you have to create those values in your home from the youngest that you possibly can until they get older to say, these are our Jewish values, and you should care about them enough that if your spouse isn't going to share those same sets of values, you probably don't want to be with them.
I just think that it's a dangerous ask of families, because a lot of people would say that, what about all the other values? What about all the other?
They should all be there too.
We've talked about this, right? This is the hockey versus shul argument, right? It's about your priorities.
Of course. And telling, and I think even just like the discussion that we're having, sounds very high horse. It sounds very up on a petty, like you should be telling your kids at a very early age. It's just like, leave me alone. I'm going to tell my kids what I'm going to tell my kids. And if you guys are rabbis, if you guys are the movement, you're going to react to what the families are doing. You're going to notice the trends. And it doesn't really work to fire and brimstone.
I'm going to say, sorry, Matthew, I'm going to say two things to that. First of all, part of the tshuva points out that you're allowed to have your non-Jewish spouse act as your Shabbos goy on Shabbat. And I was thinking to myself, which person has married somebody who isn't Jewish and is remaining not Jewish, and yet they care enough to be for their spouse to be their Shabbos goy, because they're not going to violate the Shabbos, but their spouse is, and they're going to use it that is a non-existent individual. That is literally a non-existent individual. But then the other thing is, I applaud the committee for basically saying, without saying this yet, and this is the problem that people seem to be having, is like, look, if you don't want to have a halachic standard, then maybe the conservative movement is not for you. Right? I tell this to couples all the time. I have certain standards. You might like me. You might want me to do the wedding. But if you can't hit these certain things, I'm not telling you don't belong, in the Jewish community. I'm just saying you should find a different rabbi, and I'm fine with it. But they're not. But as a movement, they're not cool with that. They're wringing their hands and freaking out because their identification that's their problem.
Your statement is one of confidence for you personally. The conservative movement has no confidence,
and that's why, taking a principled position now will alienate some enormous part of the movement. But there's more conversation about alienating the people who don't want to live inside a traditional halachic framework than the people who want to identify as conservative Jews and also do want to live inside that halachic framework. So, right, there's alienation happening here on the left and the right, and it is tearing the movement apart, right? Like what this tshuva is not, it says, rabbis in the RA should not be performing intermarriages, but it doesn't, as far as I could tell, it doesn't articulate why marrying another Jew is important, right? It doesn't want to lecture to people about that, but that's what underlies this, right? It says we're going to continue to not do this, but let's say why. Why is this a value? And I do think that the way that they found to thread that needle of welcoming the non-Jewish people in, granted, decades too late, right? My dad, I remember as a kid, was like ranting and raving about like, welcome them in, bring them in, right? Don't push them away. You're making it harder for them to be Jewish. Let's bring these people in. Let's show them how beautiful Judaism is and encourage them to have Jewish families. I think that that's the right position. And I'll also say that, data and statistics and studies, lots of people who are open to conversion do end up converting. And in the community that I live in, I can count more women who have joined our people who are the driving force of the observance level in their families. And you would never know that they joined the tribe. And it's been really illuminating for me, which is to say that like the mechanism of welcoming people in and going through a ritual conversion when people are open to it and raising those families Jewish works. So I'm glad that the conservative movement is on board, but it does require like a principled articulation of why that matters.
Maybe they have to, that's part of the problem with the movement is that they're not ready to admit that they need to take this stance, even if it means their survival, in some way or another. First of all, like I'm with you, Yedida, and I just interviewed somebody and it's in the most recent issue of Scribe Quarterly, which you should go sign up for free because it's a wonderful magazine and I push it to everybody that I can. With this guy, with Rabbi Adam Mintz, who basically has been taking this stance. He goes, I have a halachic standard for conversion. I want to welcome all these people into the fold. This is what it takes for you to be part of the community. And if you are, then great. I found it really offensive when the tshuva talks about having no non-Jewish symbols and that the kids have to be raised completely Jewish, which has been a standard that I see in a lot of the discussion around bringing in interfaith families. And I was like, in that moment, I have more compassion for my friends that are Christian ministers or other, denominations, other religions, than I have for my rabbi colleagues that are asking of this, right? Right? Could you imagine the outcry that would happen if you heard this from a Christian minister to say, oh, I will do this wedding with a Jew and a Christian as long as there is zero Judaism in the home and as long as the kids are raised extremely, completely Christian. Like, we would be yelling from the rooftops, where is your tolerance for Judaism? Why can't you accept that there's going to be Judaism in the home? We're basically saying this whole other faith that is in this family, we're asking you to repudiate that without asking you to actually join something else.
It's also unenforceable, and it's ridiculous. What, are people going to go to your house and do checks if you have a tree, if you swapped gifts?
But hold on. There's no enforcement here, right?
Exactly.
These are
I know.
Right. So everybody's making their own decision anyway. I don't think that there's enforcement here, and I think that this is as close as they could get to a statement of principles and saying, like, if your family's going to be Jewish, we welcome you. But also, like, we know that families are doing both. And if people want to go to shul and then they want to go to grandma's for Christmas, like, nobody is stopping them. It's the 21st century, right? There's no...
The wording of this is trying to stop them, I think. The wording of this argument is trying to stop them. Like, they want exclusive Jewish practice.
So, hold on one second.
Yeah.
I'm going to put my historian hat back on here. Judaism and Christianity, religion-wise, are pretty incompatible, right? Like, I am typically not sympathetic to the argument about like letting intermarriage do what Hitler couldn't. But I do think that like the openness that American culture has met Jews with over, let's say, the last 50 years, right? If you conceive of that as like the death of Judaism, right? Like lots of people have sort of like fled Jewish observance for all kinds of reasons towards that kind of openness. When I was reading the, 2014 Daniel Gordis piece, right? Like the saying that it's because the conservative movement like watered down what Judaism is. That part I think is compelling. Right? Like if we water it down, why would anybody be attracted to it? Right? If you can't
his
say
argument
what's
was
beautiful
also
and amazing about it.
The argument that he gets into is that every rabbi in a conservative shul spent every sermon preaching about how halachic we are, when the crowd just did not care.
Was not there.
Yeah,
Well, but that's also on the rabbi, right? Like
of
the
course,
rabbi.
But Yedida, look at this tshuva. The disconnect is still there. And this is why I'm telling you, the people tell you how to connect with them. You want to ignore the people, that's fine. They tell you what they want, what they don't want, and the rabbi has to adjust to it. The movement
if the rabbi just gives up his own principles and commitments, then why should they want him in their lives?
I've got to say, and I'm with you, Yedida, on this, because the greatest example of this is Chabad. Chabad refuses to water down their standards one iota, and yet they welcome all these people. They always come up with some way to make them feel welcome, because every Jew is welcome. They're not going to necessarily, but what they do is they don't water down anything that they're doing, and they seem to be growing. People that are okay with who they are coming to them. And
their identity is clear. Their self-identity is clear. And the conservative movement, I'll say it again, their self-identity could not be less clear. Either decide, intermarriage is, you can't handle it or you can handle it. But this in-between thing, they're always chasing after the puck, the ball, the game. They're always behind. That's why I said, like in 2006, they had an opportunity as a movement to be on the vanguard, to be leaders. You got to take a chance. The first one through the wall is always bloodied. Stop being so afraid. People are leaving your movement anyway.
Why not have a reform wedding?
That's what I'm trying to say. I've been trying to say that the whole time. The conservative rabbi should feel welcome and say...
If you grew up, though, if you grew up going to a conservative shul and your parents went to a conservative shul and your grandparents went to a conservative shul, you're going to start with the conservative shul. You're going to start with your home. You're going to start with your place. And if that place doesn't connect with you, then you're going to feel untethered. You say, go to reform. They've never gone to reform in their whole life. They've gone to their shul. They want their shul to do it. And they really don't see... This is the thing. They look at all the people who go to both shuls and they say, all the people are the same.
The Orthodox rabbis have no problem saying, you may have grown up here, but the fact that you're marrying a non-Jewish spouse means that I can't do this for you.
Exactly. Clear identity.
Yes.
I don't think that the identity of the movement is defined by whether or not they do an intermarriage, right? Like that's a symptom.
It is right
or a
now.
Manifestation
the
of
movement
the
is basically saying we're a halachic movement, but we want to be also inclusive of all the people who are not halachic and figure out a way that we can be okay to include all these people who we otherwise would not want to include, and let's figure this out. And that's the mistake they made in the 50s with driving on Shabbat, and they're losing their identity by trying to split the difference, as you said, trying to thread this impossible needle. I think we've gotten that one out of our way. Let's move on to textual healing.
Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing. Let's get biblical. Tell me a parsha, and we'll make it physical. Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing.
Yedida, Parshat...
Kitetse?
Sorry. I was about to say Kitisa, and I was like, that was a wrong thing.
Were you trying to train, like trick her or set her up?
Brain hiccup. Yedida, Parshat Kitisa.
No. It's not Kitisa.
There you go. You see, I made that mistake. Yedida, Parshat Kitetse. What do you have for us?
For a lot of different reasons, over the last 2 weeks, I've been thinking a lot about lechatchila and b'diavad, right? Like the ideal way to perform a mitzvah and the like totally acceptable, ticks all the boxes, but like less ideal way of fulfilling mitzvot. And like compromises and concessions that we make to live in the world or historical moments and compromises. And the rabbi of our shul, Rabbi David Wolkenfeld, a few weeks ago spoke about how, right, like Deuteronomy is Moshe's final speech to the people, and that like he's very worried about their transition into real life, right? Like up until now, right, it's been like the summer before you go off to college, right? God is leading you through the desert, taking care of your every need, performing miracles as needed to teach lessons and make points and provide for the people. But like now, as they go into the land, it's going to be real life. And God has set very high expectations for the Israelites and the ways that he expects them to live in the land. And I think that this really plays out, and that the Torah is very sensitive to exactly this, especially in the beginning of this week's Parsha. So the Parsha basically starts out with like, you're going to go to war, you are going to take booty and maybe hostages. And there might be a beautiful woman among them who you decide that you absolutely must make part of your family. So the Torah doesn't really want you to do that. But if you have to do that, here is a more humane, in antiquity, framework for doing that. And I think it's also not by accident that the next passage is about really complicated family dynamics, where if you have multiple wives and your first wife is maybe no longer your favorite wife because you maybe took this woman in war, that's implicit, not in the Torah, your first wife, the first child that you had with your first wife, is still your firstborn, entitled to a double portion of your inheritance. And don't you dare mess with that, because it will F up your family. And then the next one is about the Ben Sora Umora, right? Like the wayward and rebellious child, right? Like children are sensitive to family dynamics. You want to screw up one of your kids? Try any of these things. So I think, I think that the Torah is like saying like, okay, here are ways that you could do this, but like, warning, you might really screw it up.
I can only imagine what it's like as a woman to read, like, if you take a second wife and you like her better than your first wife, it's like, really?
I mean, I am a second wife, so.
Not concurrent.
Not at the same time. Yes, thank you, Avi. Thank you.
But
Same
anyway, I
house.
just think that like thinking about, right, like there are things that the Torah lets us do, but that might not be what the Torah is really telling us is the ideal. And it's a helpful halachic framework.
Matthew, what do you got for us?
When I teach bar and bat mitzvah students about mitzvot, I always like to throw out, like, there are some really, honor your parents, don't murder, don't steal, 10 Commandments ones that are the holidays. These are easy to kind of wrap their mind around. Then I like to throw an obscure one at them. And the one that I always throw at them is in this week's Parsha. But by the way, Ki Tetzei has more mitzvot than any other Parsha. Trivia in the Torah, 74. I did a count last night using no AI. And 74 mitzvot apparently is the total out of the 613. And the one that I always throw at the kids is Deuteronomy chapter 22, verses 6 and 7. It's known as Shiluach HaKen. If you come upon a mother bird with her young or her eggs, you are allowed to take the young or the eggs, but you must shoo the mother bird away first. And if you perform this mitzvah, it says, you will enjoy a long life. It's just such a fascinating one. And as you could expect, people listening to it, most of the kids go, this is a mitzvah? Like, what the heck? It's kind of specific. It's kind of weird. What's going on here? Rambam, Maimonides, points out, and this is kind of what I was talking about at the beginning with the blessing of the animals and the role of animals. There's a lot of places in the Torah where it doesn't come out and say animals have stress, animals have feelings. But that's what Rambam says. Like, a mother bird has an attachment. It might be different in terms of the way it's expressed, but animals and humans share things in common, like an emotional attachment to our young. So that right there, Rambam. Ramban, Nachmanides, makes such an interesting comment on this line. He says that if you just go around willy-nilly, taking mother birds and their young at the same time, it's a slippery slope for your own kind of ethics and morality, and that a law like this keeps you from that slippery slope and from straying. And Rashi, Yedidah's boy, Yedidah's favorite, says, this is an easy mitzvah, and if this mitzvah leads to long life, imagine what all the hard mitzvahs will lead to. So what at the first seems like kind of a weird, obscure little mitzvah opens up all this kind of conversation about the way we act, how we treat animals, how we, the moral code we set for ourselves when nobody is looking, and all from what seems really strange. Don't take a mother bird with her young and with her eggs, which I've been teaching forever, so I figured I should mention it.
Yes, and...
Sounds like improv. Sounds like improv rules.
Because literally you took half of what I was about to say.
Oh, no, I didn't. I can't believe you were
but
going
this
there.
is perfect. You have teed this up perfectly because the flip side of what you are saying is that there are many, many rabbis who use this exact mitzvah to illustrate the fact that we should not be looking for any of the reasons for the commandments. Right? Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in the Kuzari, he goes and points out, he says, right, no, mitzvot are not about helping us understand moral perfection and all this. It's you're allowed to do that that, but ultimately it's about God decreeing certain things and you're supposed to follow them. And that you're allowed to do this, but it's a lesser Judaism if you search out the reasons for it, because why do you need to look for a reason for it? God told you to do it and you should do it. Now, so look, I'm on Maimonides' side, right? I think that it's right to assume that, people have reasons for creating laws, and God has reasons too. He says this explicitly in the Guide for the Perplexed, right? He says that God has reasons because people have reasons, and it must be that God has reasons for doing it, and then we have a responsibility to look for those things. The piece that I want to add that I found fascinating on, this discussion this week is that David Hartman adds a really, really interesting twist. And he points out that people who follow the commandments blindly simply because they believe God told them to do these things, they have no way of communicating with those who observe commandments and don't believe or who have any doubts. Right? Reasons are the things that enable the dialogue and the debate, and we should be actively seeking them out for this very reason, because it means that religious people can get into a dialogue and debate and discuss morality and ethics and human perfection with people that are less religious or who have their doubts about their faith, because you get into the reasoning, you have a shared language to be able to talk about what's going on. And I think that that's fascinating. And that actually circles back to our main topic. But I think that that's a really interesting way to approach the idea that we have reasons for all of the mitzvot.
Guys, we can't talk about sending the mother bird away without also mentioning that is a huge, right? Because of that promise that it would lead to long life.
Speaking
that when that falls apart, right? The person who falls off the ladder while they're doing that mitzvah and dies, throws a wrench in people's faith, right? So that is a huge place where faith also falls apart for a lot of people. That is my dog barking. I don't know if you can hear it, but
he wants a bark mitzvah, and you know what? I'll be there.
Is coming up on it. We're getting close. We'll plan. Maybe we'll bring you in, Matthew.
You do it in dog years, or do you do it in people years?
So this is my opportunity to make a plug for one of my husband's first edited collections, available on Amazon, called A Jew's Best Friend, the image of the dog through the ages. And there is indeed a scholarly chapter in there, I think not written by him, about the ritual of the bark mitzvah in America. So
does he quote Groucho Marx, who was Jewish?
I have not read it.
And once famously said, outside of a book, dog is a man's best friend. Inside of a dog, it's too dark to read.
Thank you for listening to Not in Heaven this week. Our producer and editor is Zachary Kaufman. Michael Freeman is the executive producer. To catch every episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support our show, consider making a donation to the CJN at thecjn.ca/donate.
The Ashkenaz Festival returns to locations across Toronto from August 30th to September 6th. Experience the best of the global Jewish music scene, including klezmer, Yiddish, Sephardic, Ladino, Persian, and so much more. Most programs free, from downtown to North York. Details at ashkenaz.ca.